Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. We have a jam-packed show on tap for you, but it is Veterans Day, so I want to thank each and every single person that has served this country from the bottom of my heart. I have family members who have served, and I know it's the ultimate sacrifice for you, not only you and your family members. So for the entire month, salute the service, not only on Veterans Day, but this entire month, I'm giving away free raffle tickets to anybody who has served this country. All you got to do, send me a photo of you in service at Jeremy Chugs on Twitter, and you'll get a chance to win this J.J. Watt Salute to Service picture. It is, he's wearing his Salute to Service jersey. It's autographed, JSA certified. Once again, I just want to thank each and every person that served this country. Coming up on today's show, we're going to look at the latest Texans injury news, updates, plus some free agent targets to help in the Texans secondary. Because if you watched my video yesterday, you would know we are very thin at that position with the injury that the Texans sustained this past weekend up against Jacksonville. Now, before we get into all of that, the top storyline that we got to talk about is these guys in concussion protocol. If you didn't know, my guy Aaron Wilson broke it all down yesterday. Great follow, great channel as well. If you want to go check out his YouTube channel after this, I highly recommend it. But the important news on all the concussion protocol, CJ Stroud, he was still sensitive to light and sound this past Friday. And with the Texans playing on a short week after this week, they play the Titans on Sunday, then they turn around and play the Bills on Thursday Night Football. There's a belief within this Texans, front office staff that it might be better to keep CJ Stroud out of this game for that short week up against the Buffalo Bills. The Texans, they've already faced the Titans without CJ Stroud and won. They won with Case Keenum, and maybe, playing the worst team in the NFL at the moment, you don't need to rush CJ Stroud back. Tytus Howard, though, he more likely to return this week. He was at the game on Sunday, and obviously, if he's there with the loud stadium, the lights, that's a good sign for somebody who's dealing with a concussion in Tytus Howard. So expect him to be back and probably at that right tackle spot. I know yesterday we talked about, will the Texans move him to left guard? Will they bump him inside with everything with Trent Brown? We actually have more on Trent Brown and an injury that he sustained this past weekend that it looks like Tytus Howard is going to be that starting right tackle this week. And then Jalen Pitre, another guy who actually after the Broncos game, it happened towards the very end that he sustained that concussion. Wasn't even sure that he had a concussion until during the middle of the week leading up to the Jacksonville Jaguars game. Jalen Pitre, another guy we got to look at, especially with the safety injuries. Will he be back this week? We got to look at the injury reports throughout practice this week, but I would say it's much more likely that we'll see Tytus Howard and Jalen Pitre suit up against Tennessee than CJ Stroud. Before I get into more injury news and updates, hey, are you still hype about that win this past weekend? Are we excited for some more Texans football? If so, if you love the Texans, go down and smash that hype button. All you got to do, just scroll right to the comments section. If you're proud to be a Texans fan, if you're hyped for this week, go down and show it. Hit that hype button real quick. All right, I mentioned Trent Brown. He got injured up against Jacksonville, was seen limping after that Jaguars game. According to Aaron Wilson, he said, it's a minor injury, but one where it'll probably lead to all the discussion of Tytus Howard moving inside. Probably none of that this week. We'll probably see Tytus Howard once again at that right tackle spot, and Trent Brown either, the backup right tackle or maybe inactive, let him rest a week after starting 100% of the offensive snaps for your Houston Texans up against Jacksonville. Something to monitor, though, because, like I said, a lot of fans wanted to see maybe what it would look like with a Trent Brown, Tytus Howard tackle guard duo. Doesn't look like we'll get that this week, but that doesn't mean we won't get it in the future, because I don't know if Trent Brown will be able to go up against Tennessee. We'll have to see how his injury progresses throughout the week as well. Another injury that might keep another Texan out this week, Ka'imi Fairbairn. He has a leg injury. He is questionable for this week once again. Matt Wright was the kicker for the Texans this past week up against the Jags, and he was, serviceable. He had no problems over here with the Texans kicker situation. So maybe that lends them to say, we'll let Ka'imi sit another week, get that leg healed, because there's one injury you don't want with the kicker. Probably a leg injury. So we'll let him kind of rest it up just a little bit more. More great nuggets from my man Aaron. Texans tight end Cade Stover could return as soon as this week. Remember, he sustained a fractured foot in that first game of the year. Will the Texans be able to get one of their tight ends back? We've talked about it ad nauseum that maybe this is the reason why the Texans were off to such a slow start, because Nick Caley, former tight end coach, he wants to use the tight ends, and two of the top three tight ends for your Houston Texans were out by week 2 of the season. So great news that Cade Stover possibly going to return this week, and it could be huge for this Texans offense because, his first week, 4 receptions, 22 yards, even with them out. They've put in Harrison Bryant. They love using those 2 tight end sets. So could we see Cade Stover this week, and will it have an impact on how the Texans offense performs moving forward? Let me know. How much of an impact do you think Cade Stover will make if he returns this week? Scale it 1 to 10. 1, no impact at all. It's almost like he's not even back. 10, you think the offense is going to have a dramatic change? Let me know down in the comments section. I'm going to go with an 8. I think Cade Stover returning adds another legit receiving threat at the tight end position, and we've seen Dalton Schultz this year. He's looked really good in a almost resurgent year for this Texans squad. Obviously, the Texans want to use those tight ends just a little bit more, and having another receiving threat, and a big part of Cade Stover's game, he is an excellent run blocker. Nick Caley loves to use those wham blocks. So what does that mean? That means the tight end kind of comes in motion, and he blocks the defensive tackle. He goes behind the center and guard and takes one of those defensive linemen or a linebacker who's blitzing up the A gap. Cade Stover is great at those wham blocks and great at the point of attack on those blocks. So it's going to be really good news for Woody Marks, Nick Chubb, to see Cade Stover out there as well. Another injury, which this isn't new news. This came out right after that Jags win this past weekend. MJ Stewart, who was carted off in that game, out for the season. So coming up in just a moment, I'm going to give you my MJ Stewart replacements, some safeties on the squad, and some safeties in free agency that this Texans team could consider to add. Before I get into that, though, couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsors over at Prize Picks. Get started today with America's #1 fantasy sports app out there. I love it. My producer Xavier loves it, and we know you will too. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The hard-hitting football action is even better with Prize Picks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right, that never gets old. So keep the season rolling on Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. It's super simple to play. All you got to do, pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you can cash in just like ya boy. Just like your boy who cashed in this past weekend. This was my lineup for Texans Jags, and ooh, mama, we are getting paid. Davis Mills, you know he got a passing touchdown. Nico Collins, his longest reception was 54 yards. Travis Etienne, 3 yards on his first rush. I was sweating. And then Trevor Lawrence, the one-handed pick from Derek Stingley. This lineup made watching that Texans game just that much more sweeter. So join the millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app today. Download the Prize Picks app. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. All right, now next up with sorry, Jonathan, I think you got a new photo, so my bad. But Jonathan Alexander, another great follow on Texans Twitter. He put this out this past week, and I just want to preface, the MJ Stewart replacements, this, that, and the other with, I do think the Texans will adjust their defense based on the guys that they have out there, just like they did this past weekend. They ran a lot more 4-3 base defense. If you remember in the beginning of the season, the Texans primarily run a 4-2-5, which means they only have 2 linebackers in. This past weekend, they had E.J. Speed, Henry To'oTo'o play a lot more in that 3 linebacker sets with Azeez Al-Shire in the middle. So just something to consider as we move forward. Also, when they went to the nickel packages, Kamari Lassiter moved into the slot a lot, and they put Tremon Smith out there. So just something to consider as we do look at guys who need to step up on this Texans defense. 3 of them in particular. Myles Bryant did a fantastic job this past weekend in stepping up after that MJ Stewart injury. He had 51 defensive snaps. Reminder, these are just defensive snaps. This doesn't account into any special teams up against the Jags. Tremon Smith, as I mentioned, they moved Kamari Lassiter into the slot multiple times. He got 26 defensive snaps. And somebody that I want to see more of, Jaylen Reed, the 6th-round pick out of Penn State. I was really high on this kid whenever they drafted him during the training camp preseason process. He obviously got injured, got put on short-term IR to start the season, but I still think this was a steal in the draft, and I want to see a little bit more of Jaylen Reed out there on the field and see what he can do. Another guy who we all want to see if he's going to come back and see what he can do, Jimmy Ward, close to returning. Now, I'm being told that, it's more like a couple weeks away. I don't think the Texans are going to rush him back up against Tennessee. Kind of the same reasoning with C.J. Stroud, right? You don't want to look down on your opponent, and this may be a trap game. Maybe, we're falling into that of we're kind of downplaying our opponent in the Tennessee Titans, but I don't think a guy who's been injured all year, they don't want to rush him back before he's 100%, especially against an opponent like the Tennessee Titans, where you think that some of the guys that are on your roster can serve due instead for Jimmy Ward. They don't absolutely need him this week, but I am being told that, maybe up against the Bills, maybe the week after, we could see the return of Jimmy Ward. Another guy on the practice squad that we'll have to look into, possibly an elevation on Sunday, Jalen Mills, the veteran safety corner hybrid. He could be another guy that they end up moving up on game day, bring up to the active roster from the practice squad. He has a lot of experience, and I think could be an easy guy to plug in and play, and just be somebody who this coaching staff trusts going into the game, rather than some of these other rookies. Maybe if they don't feel 100% with Jaylen Reed, which I don't know why. I think he's a pretty good player. But Jalen Mills, like I said, another guy on that practice squad who the Texans could turn to this weekend. Now, coming up, some top free agent safeties, because I was asked a ton, Jeremy, after MJ Stewart, who's available? Who can they get? Obviously, the trade deadline has come and gone. So let's look at the top guys that the Texans could end up signing. And a quick reminder, if the Texans make a move, we're going to break it down here. It's 100% free. Hit that sub button for Texans news and rumors content all year long. We got you covered here at Texans Today. All right, first up, and maybe the most notable name and the biggest question mark, in my opinion, of how is he not on an NFL roster already? Justin Simmons. And maybe he's just waiting to play towards the end of the year and get on a contender. And I don't know if he views the Texans as a contender yet. It's sitting at 4-5. They're a game out of the wild card race right now. But Justin Simmons, if he's available, if the Texans can go ahead and sign him, if he's willing to come and help us out on this, hard stretch of games towards the end of the year, why not, dude? Last year, 7 PBUs, 2 interceptions. Maybe he's not the all-pro that he once was, but even a 75% Justin Simmons of what he once was is still a really, really good player. So maybe we'll see him play. I don't know if there's more underlying things, going on with Justin Simmons, whether he's retired, whether he doesn't want to play anymore, this, that, or the other. If he's good to go, though, I would heavily consider looking into signing a guy like a Justin Simmons. But what say you? Should the Texans sign another safety? Let me know down in the comment sections. Give me a yes, give me a no. What say you? Should the Texans go out and sign another safety? Because actually, there is a guy who just hit free agency from one of our division rivals. His name is Quandre Diggs, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, a safety who I think this would be another smart signing by this Texans squad if they need more depth at that position in division. So he knows the Colts. He knows the Jags. He probably knows the Texans pretty well as well. A veteran in this league, somebody who you can plug and play on the back end next to Kalen Bullock. Is he what he once was? No. But at the same time, Quandre Diggs, I think, would be a serviceable rotation piece in this secondary if the Texans need it down the stretch of this season. Let's look at somebody who has been on this Texans squad before, though, in Grayland Arnold. He's somebody who played with the Texans in 2023. This coaching staff had nothing but glowing remarks about Grayland Arnold. Now, he hasn't played a ton since then. He's bounced around from practice squad to practice squad, been injured as well, so kind of been plagued by that injury bug. But if he's good to go, why not bring him in for a workout and say, hey, you've worked with us before. It's worked out before. Why not bring him in again and at least maybe put him on the practice squad and be another guy who you can elevate on game day, because MJ Stewart will be placed on season-ending IR. That opens up a spot on the Texans 53-man roster. Maybe they elevate somebody from the practice squad and you can replace that person on the practice squad with a Grayland Arnold. And this last one, maybe a long shot, and maybe I'm just, grasping at straws here. Lewis Cine, a former first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings who has been a bust. He's been a bust. It's not, nothing against Lewis Cine. I'm not saying he's a horrible player or somebody that can't make an NFL roster anymore. Why not look at somebody? He was drafted in the first round out of Georgia for a reason. Maybe has a connection there a little bit with Kamari Lassiter, both being those Georgia Bulldogs formerly in college. So maybe look at it as somebody like a Lewis Cine to add to this squad, maybe on the practice squad as well if you want to add some more depth at that safety spot. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you made it to the end of today's show, make sure to hit me up on Twitter at Jeremy Chugs, and we're doing something right if you made it to the very end. So hit that subscribe button for daily Texans news and rumors content all season long.